My wife is frigid and no longer feels sexually attracted to me. We have been together for 9 years and have been married for more than 3 of those years. At the beginning of our relationship, we were both sexually active, but over time the passion gradually faded and sex became infrequent. It was only natural that I wanted to know about it beforehand, but I only found out just before the wedding. Unfortunately, our intimate life was always one-sided. I showed sexual interest, but she responded to my urges for the sake of preserving the relationship, not on her own initiative. In essence, she used sex as a tool to maintain our marriage. This is obvious to me now, although it would have been good to know this beforehand. The surprise to me is that despite her claiming to be asexual, she still offers to have sex from time to time. She knows I need it, but every time I refuse, I just can't enjoy sex with someone who is only doing it for my benefit. I want to be with a partner who actually wants to have sex with me, not just for fulfillment. Recently, we went to a party at one of her friends' house. Although I'm not a fan of such events, I agreed to go since I knew some of the people there. Usually at such parties, we just sit in the living room, talking, discussing anything and everything. But the discussions always end up being about racy topics, about sex or personal stories of a sexual nature. I was initially uncomfortable with these conversations, especially when women would talk about how much they loved having sex with their partners and the different things they did in bed. But the worst part was that my wife started making up different stories about our sex life. She would even include completely false details that never happened. I knew it had to do with her shame about her asexuality, so I just nodded, carefully hiding my outrage. It was hard for me to express my feelings in front of other people, especially when she was creating such false plots. At the last party, one of her friends, who always provokes conflict for no particular reason, told me that I should try harder and give my wife oral sex. Pressed by the attention of all the people in the room, I looked at my wife and asked if she wanted me to intervene, but she refused to openly speak up. I just shrugged and said that I really enjoy oral sex, but my wife won't let me do it because we don't have any kind of intimate relationship. It was all clear when her face contorted with embarrassment and surprise. I didn't mean to explicitly say that she was asexual. I just said that we hadn't had sex in years and it wasn't in our plans. She started apologizing and explaining that everything was fateful, and that we did have sex, even though it wasn't true at all. This was an even bigger blow to me, and I apologized for not letting her know that her fictional stories were only pushing me away from her even more. I eventually decided to leave the party and took a cab home. I suggested that she also use my Uber account, so she could go home or stay overnight at a friend's house. But I was embarrassed to stay and sit there, becoming the target of jokes and the realization that her embarrassing asexuality was in the public domain. My wife immediately ran to the bathroom and told me to leave, and we've barely spoken since then except for some minimal apologies. Some of her friends have written to me, naming every name in the book and saying they would induce her to do it to me one day or even set her up with other men. The husbands also apologized for their ignorance and offered to buy me a beer if I wanted to have a drink with a friend. The whole situation was such an ordeal for me, and I apologized for pushing her into such a position. But I had little other choice. The kind of sensation that can't be compared to anything else. However, in spite of this, I had a lingering discomfort that significantly affects my life. A lot of people in her environment already know this, and it has become something of an eye-opener for them. While I completely disagree with this attitude, I can kind of look at the situation and understand where it's coming from. It's a time when I call myself a jerk, and I decide to update a few things in my life. Still, I don't mind socializing, and even the opposite. I enjoy talking to others, inside reasonable boundaries, of course. I genuinely love her, and that is why I live with her. Although these moments are rare, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I realize that these moments make a big difference. Deep down, there is no part of me that believes she is a bait and switch for me. That simply isn't true. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't know the truth. She is asexual, and that is her specialty. Even though she doesn't hang out with other guys, I don't mind that choice. After all, I am not looking for sex outside of my relationship either. Nevertheless, there are times when I realize it's penetrating me, and in those moments I have to rage. These are just isolated instances that rarely happen, no more than 2 or 3 times a year. My boundary is all about myself. I don't want to have sex with anyone who doesn't desire me. There's nothing wrong or selfish about that. I'm just sticking to my beliefs. The problem isn't that I'm involved with an asexual person. It's how we both approach the situation and how she expects me to act in certain ways. She is taking the brunt of this situation, and I am grateful for that. I have apologized to her, and she has apologized to me. We have found a way to work out these issues that have arisen between us. She tells all of her friends about it, and they all take it normally and fully support her. Some friends have apologized to me for any misunderstandings they may have had, and I accept their apologies. Of course, she put me in a difficult situation, but only one of them was on her side. At this point, however, it no longer matters much. All in all, I apologize. Perhaps I should have been better off not going to training camp or something. We started going to couples counseling, and I'm glad we're back at it. Our goal is to find a real path forward and work out all the issues. There are a few things I'd like to clarify, and I'll respond to comments so that misunderstandings are resolved. None of this is just about sex, because sexuality is not just about tapping into the physical side, but includes a variety of aspects. She has no desire for sex, but otherwise she still enjoys physical contact. She is willing to do it for me sometimes to make me happy. That, in her opinion, is her job, and I appreciate her for that. I am uncomfortable regarding this, but it has nothing to do with my male pride in any way. I just want my partner to genuinely want to have sex with me. Otherwise, it turns into masturbating with someone else's body when I have no problem with that. In some of the comments, I may have exaggerated too much, and that led to misunderstandings. However, I couldn't remain silent when she was thrown under the bus. I value her support more than sex. A lot of people have noticed that discussing your sex life with friends is weird, but I think it's not a big deal. I've been sent resources about being a partner to an asexual person, and I'm grateful for that. Some people have been confused by the situation, but that's an individual thing. In any case, age is irrelevant, and each person determines their own preferences. So yes, it's a boring update, but that's what the comments say, and I have no choice but to accept that. This way, my wife will continue to socialize with those she is comfortable with while I am at home. Her relationships with others don't necessarily bother me.